I'm Courtney Fallon, and welcome to The Game Plan on Reach TV, your insider guide to this week's key NFL action. In The Game Plan, I tap into the Bleav podcast network to bring you the most important information you need to know to stay in the loop. All right, so the NFL Combine has come and gone, leaving us all scrambling to rewrite our mock drafts. With the offseason kicking into high gear and news coming out of camps across the country, I am joined by Daniel Wilcox, a friend of The Game Plan from the Bleav in Ravens podcast, to keep you in the loop. Daniel, you ready to play 3 and out?
Let's do it, Courtney. I'm excited. Let's go.
All right, Daniel, you know the deal. 3 downs. Let's roll. First down, the Broncos will take a record $85 million dead cap hit for releasing Russell Wilson. First of all, what is a dead cap hit? Can you explain it to the audience? And how will this affect the Broncos' offseason plans?
Well, basically a dead cap hit is they're going to have an $85 million hit this year to their salary cap. That means they lose almost $100 million as far as signing other players. That's $85 million that you won't get back. It goes out to Russell Wilson, and he's not even on the actual team this year. That sucks for the Denver Broncos. It would definitely affect a lot for them. Luckily, they got a guy by the name of Sean Payton who's been through all types of stuff before, and I think they'll figure this thing out with the GM and Sean Payton and company. They'll get back to business and be the Denver Broncos that we know of the old days.
Second down, Jason Kelce announced his intention to retire, had a big press conference the other day. How big of a hole does this create on the offensive line for the Eagles, and how hard is it to replace a top-line center like Jason Kelce?
It's extremely hard. The reason why Jalen Hurts was so good in Philadelphia was because they had a guy by the name of Jason Kelce. Kelce is going to be extremely hard for the Philadelphia Eagles to replace. He's the captain of the offensive line, who is like the centerpiece of the entire offense. It's just like losing your star quarterback. Now you got to go replace the guy that the quarterback trusted the most on the field. Super hard for them to replace in the run game and the passing game for the Philadelphia Eagles. I think Jalen Hurts is going to miss that guy next year.
Certainly, Jason Kelce will be missed on that offensive line. Fun fact, Andy Reid drafted both Jason Kelce when he was with the Eagles, and he drafted Travis Kelce with the Chiefs.
Wow.
All right, third down. Does the Mike Evans deal lead to Baker Mayfield re-signing with the Bucs?
I think the Bucs is going to re-sign, Baker Mayfield regardless of Mike Evans leaving or anything. But it makes that deal a little bit easier for them. Giving up the type of money they're going to have to give up to keep a star quarterback down in Tampa. Mike Evans leaving is going to be a huge loss for Tampa Bay, and it's going to be hard to replace. But at the same time, you get a chance to snag Baker Mayfield. There's still some receivers out there that want to play with that guy, so I think it'll make it a little bit easier on him and the Bucs to be able to get that deal done.
All right, fantastic stuff. Thank you, Daniel. We'll see you again soon.
You're welcome, Courtney.
All right, next up, we are talking with Bleav's Joe DeLeone, who will be giving us all of the latest news on the NFL Draft post-Combine. Joe, welcome to the show. How are you doing? How was Indianapolis?
It was great getting to catch up with a ton of different people out there in Indianapolis, and it was my first time actually getting to be there, and it was truly a great experience, and excited to talk to you today, Courtney.
What are your thoughts on J.J. McCarthy's performance, and where do you think he will go in the draft?
Yeah, I think that without a doubt, the one person's name who constantly kept getting brought up was J.J. McCarthy. There's a lot of teams that still need to figure out their future of the quarterback position that are going to be really interested in J.J. McCarthy and could potentially trade up. He's a player who's going to need time to sit for at least 2 to 3 seasons before he can play, but J.J. McCarthy truly is a gifted player.
Question number 2, which players did you really become high on after not noticing them before, seeing at the Combine, and how well that they did?
Yeah, 2 that come to mind immediately. One being Xavier Worthy, the Texas wide receiver. He is so explosive linearly. He is a great long speed athlete, but he doesn't really have the play strength. He doesn't really have the body control or the consistent hands. And then another one who is somebody who I didn't even really consider was Braden Fisk, the defensive tackle from Florida State. He tested in some of the upper categories for all of the athletic testing for defensive tackles, but he still is realistically someone who is going to go on day 3.
Joe, on the flip side of that conversation, which players underwhelmed you with their athletic testing that might have hurt their draft stock?
Yeah, one that stands out the most is Ennis Rakestraw, the cornerback from Missouri. His testing was some of the worst amongst any of the corners. He's not a very big player. His long speed wasn't very good. His jumps weren't very good. And then one that really surprised me was Bucky Irving, the running back from Oregon, who ends up running in the 4.5s. His jumps were some of the worst amongst the running backs. Compares very well to Kyron Williams, so don't be surprised if Bucky Irving goes somewhere and still ends up being really productive.
When you're talking about legacy players, players in the NFL Hall of Famers, Frank Gore, Marvin Harrison, Jerry Rice has a son that's coming into the NFL. What separates their children? You know, I mean, they obviously have to pay the path for themselves, but what separates those players from the rest of the bunch?
They're usually not as good of athletes as their fathers were. One guy in particular, Marvin Harrison Jr., who has been lauded as this generational wide receiver prospect, is possibly more gifted of a prospect than his father was. He's 4 inches taller than his dad. He is a lot bigger and more physical than his dad was, and he still has the same athletic movement abilities. Him bringing to the table here, I think, is going to be a dominant player. Other guys, though, that I'm not like super excited by, you brought up Frank Gore Jr. and another one, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the linebacker from Clemson.
What are your thoughts on some of the players dismissing some of the drills or not taking some of the medical things that are usually required at the combine?
Yeah, you mentioned some of these changes, and this had to have been one of the strangest years for guys deciding not to participate in a lot of different things. And if you hear any former player that's been at the NFL Combine, it is a grueling, horrible process to go through with these medical checks if you have any serious injuries. Caleb Williams didn't really have that. But one thing that was very, very odd, Jaden Daniels and Malik Neighbors, LSU quarterback, LSU wide receiver, chose not to weigh in, chose not to get measured for their height, their arm length, any of that stuff. I don't love that those guys didn't do that. And I would hope going forward that the NFL maybe requires there to be measurements at the very least from these players.
Joe DeLeone, thank you so much for joining the game plan and sharing your insight. We hope to have you on again before the NFL draft. When we return, we will be taking a close look at Ohio State's Marvin Harrison Jr. with Chimdi Chekwa and Bryant Browning. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Well, Ohio State is known for nurturing and producing NFL-ready talent, and this year they will see a once-in-a-generation talent in Marvin Harrison Jr. leave their campus for the NFL. To break down why this player is so special, let's hear from Chimdi Chekwa and Bryant Browning from the Bleav in Buckeyes podcast. Guys, what's going on in Columbus?
Thanks, Courtney. Marvin Harrison Jr., outstanding player, man. Chim, you was a former quarterback. What do you see when you look at this wide receiver? How do you guard this guy?
He's borderline unguardable. I mean, he's one of those guys. He's a cornerback's worst nightmare because he has that combination of both the size and the strength, but also the quickness. He has like a cat-like quickness, like a small receiver. But even if you are able to keep up with him, do your job, when you're in position, you still have to deal with his size, his catch radius, and all those other things. And he has a great ability, a great combination of strength and flexibility where he can maintain good balance and body control and complete the catch. But he is a tough cover. You know, one of the guys I think of when I look at him is a guy like AJ Green, who also had a little bit of that. But Marvin Harrison, he's just a different animal.
Yeah, so that's our guy, Marvin Harrison Jr., fantastic player for Ohio State over his career. And now we look forward to seeing him at the NFL. Obviously, we're not seeing him much at the Combine, right? He kind of ran routes for scouts last year, so now he's just like, watch my film. You guys know what I can do. You guys know who I am. And we're just going to see where our guy lands. So shout out to Marvin Harrison Jr. We're really excited to see your future. And his dad was a Hall of Famer. So, I mean, I don't want to compare it to a guy. It's like, just be your dad. I think that's kind of good enough, right? So we'll see what he can do there. But always, for all the Buckeye fans out there, feel free to check us out on Bleav in Buckeyes. That's all we have. So back to you, Courtney.
Well, Marvin Harrison Jr. has a huge pro day coming up in Columbus later this month. He is an NFL-ready talent and one of the #1 wide receivers on everyone's board. He has huge shoes to fill with his father, Hall of Fame wide receiver Marvin Harrison, but certainly he is an NFL-ready talent. Well, up next, we're talking running backs in the NFC. We all know that Christian McCaffrey is the heartbeat of the 49ers. But let's hear from Tommy Call from the Bleav in 49ers podcast to find out who makes his list of the best running backs in the NFC. Tommy, what do you got for me?
Thanks, Courtney. I'm sure a lot of fantasy football managers out there already know the NFC is loaded with some of the best backfield talent in the game. Let's run down the top 5 running backs in the NFC, starting at number 5 with Atlanta's Bijan Robinson. While I think he had an up and down start to his career with some questionable usage, Robinson's future with a play caller like Zach Robinson now in Atlanta could quickly elevate himself up this list. Moving on to number 4, I think Rams running back Kyren Williams has absolutely earned himself a spot on this list after a breakout campaign under Sean McVay. Williams racked up over 1,100 yards on the ground with 12 scores, and he tacked on another 3 touchdown grabs. Moving on to number 3, I'm going to cheat a little bit here by taking both of the Detroit Lions running backs off the board with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs at number 3. While Gibbs started slow in his rookie season, it opened the door for David Montgomery to take over and thrive as the lead back in Ben Johnson's offense. At number 2, you might have an opinion on his production or consistency, but Saquon Barkley's raw talent is hard to deny and worthy of a spot here at number 2 on our list. Saquon Barkley has proven he can be the engine that fuels an offense. Now at number 1, with no surprise, it's Christian McCaffrey. I think it's pretty universal and rather unanimous that number 23 for the 49ers is not only the top running back in the NFC, but the entire NFL. In Kyle Shanahan's system, behind a guy like Trent Williams, McCaffrey looks like he gets better every single game. He is so consistently good that I think we don't even talk about him enough here in the Bay Area. But not today, as he rightfully takes down the number 1 spot on our list of top running backs in the NFC. All right, that's the top 5. Back to you, Courtney. Thank you.
Awesome, Tommy. I love the insight. Great list for the NFC and the running backs. Here's a couple that I have on my list. We got Kyren Williams, of course, with the Rams. DeAndre Swift. Can't forget about Jahmyr Gibbs with the Detroit Lions. And, I mean, Saquon Barkley with the New York Giants, but soon to be free agent. We'll see where he goes if he jumps over to the AFC as well. Well, Cardinal fans have had little to celebrate over the last few years, mostly thanks to the injury bug. The team faltered to a 4-13 record this past season, but they did get a reminder of what a healthy Kyler Murray can bring to the table. To find out what the Cardinals need to do to get back to their winning ways, let's hear from Javon Adams and Ed Smith from the Bleav in Cardinals podcast. Guys, what can we expect from Arizona?
Thanks, Courtney. This is my name is Javon Adams. That's Ed Smith, Bleav in Cardinals. So we got the draft coming up, easy. And the combine is over. All the workout, the underwear Olympics is done. But let's get into, I'm going to read off something to you. You tell me if I'm right or wrong in terms of the needs for the Arizona Cardinals. Defensive tackle.
Check.
All right. Cornerback.
Check.
Wide receiver.
Check.
Okay. Interior offensive line.
Check.
Okay. Edge rusher.
Check. Double
Running
check.
back.
Check. Yeah.
Okay. So all of those, we know what the Cardinals are looking or trending to do with that number 4 pick, but there's more than just one pick in the draft. So out of all those, and I think I know, I might be leading the witness a little bit here, but what do you see in terms of the biggest, what's the biggest need for the Cardinals? Give me that in just a quick snippet, because they can get it on the podcast.
Total rebuild, man. We got to start with wide receiver, I think, to get Kyler some weapons, and then be smart with that second pick that we have in the first round, courtesy of Houston, maybe to address the offensive line. It's a deep offensive line draft. Then from there, you got to start filling holes in all the positions that we talked about, man. That's first and foremost.
That's how we do it. So catch Bleav in Cardinals. And without further ado, back to you, Courtney.
Absolutely. I have to agree with this one. This is a full-fledged rebuild for Arizona. The Cards need help at multiple positions on both defense and offense, not to mention a brand new number 1 wide receiver. Well, running backs are the one position where we regularly see rookies making an impact on the field. So to go over the top running backs in this year's draft, who you might want to look at drafting in the fall, let's hear from Michael Fabiano and Lindsay Rhodes from the Fantasy Football Show. All right, guys, I trust you. Who am I drafting this year?
Thank you, Courtney, Lindsay, and Fabs here with some rookie running backs that might have fantasy value for us in year one. This one's a tough one, Fabs, because running back more than any other position is completely dictated from a fantasy value standpoint on opportunity. And there isn't a first-round running back in this year's class. The earliest we're going to see a running back come off the board is probably in the second, and so landing spot will very much matter. That said, is there anyone you like kind of regardless, you think?
Well, you know how I feel about the NFL Combine as it pertains to fantasy. I don't really think it matters all that much. But Jalen Wright is a player who definitely shined at the Combine out of Tennessee. The Volunteers have a long history of really good running backs coming out of that school. He was the second fastest running back in terms of the 40. His measurables were comparable to like a Breece Hall or an Alvin Kamara. Pretty good guys, right, from a fantasy standpoint. So Jalen may be the right pick if he ends up with the right team in fantasy.
Jonathan Brooks is the number one running back on a load of boards that you'll see. He is coming off a torn ACL. That concerns me in terms of year one fantasy value. Todd Gurley was in the similar situation, was the 10th overall pick and had a great year one. But I think that's an opportunity-driven situation. If you're not going to be taken with a high draft pick, we can't guarantee that. And so I'm a little bit scared of that, despite the talent. Trey Benson is a guy that I know a lot of people like, had a good combine, ran a 4.39 at 216. He's expected to go in the second round. That's a name that needs to be on your radar. And then I like Bucky Irving also in a later round as a receiving back. He was really slippery at Oregon. So keep an eye on that because those catches have value for us in PPR. Courtney, back to you.
Always insightful, Michael Fabiano and Lindsay Rhodes. They know their stuff. Certainly, Jalen Wright is a guy that I'm jotting down on my list. From Tennessee, go Vols, and we will see who the rest of the sleepers are in this year's draft. It's so exciting to see how it goes in those upcoming rounds, days 2 and days 3. Okay, it is that time of the show where we play Pick 6 on the game plan. And this week we will be discussing the top 6 free agent running backs in the NFL with Will McFadden from the Bleav in Falcons podcast. Will, welcome to the show. Are you ready to play Pick 6?
Heck yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you so much for having me back on. Can't wait to talk some running backs with you.
Number 1 on your list was Saquon Barkley with the New York Giants, and he has been told that he is able to explore the free agent market. Where do you see Saquon Barkley going?
You know, I don't think it's out of the question that he ends up returning to New York. I think this is a little bit more of a case of, you know, the Giants allowing the market to really dictate the value of one of the best young running backs in the league right now, who still has an incredibly high ceiling. And as the Giants look to remake their offense a little bit, I get why they would be willing to say, we need to shake some things up here. But Saquon has got to be the top of any team's wish list that is looking to add a veteran who could be the guy for the next 4 or 5 years.
Let's talk about that guy who's number 2 on your list. It's Josh Jacobs. Missed 4 games because of injury. He struggled along with the Raiders offense as well. Where could you see him ending up?
Yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs, I think, is still a very, very good player. He's only 26 years old. He's just a year removed from being the rushing leader in the NFL. I think Josh McDaniels' offense just really hampered, frankly, a lot of players in Las Vegas. Yeah. And so I think that you'll see a younger quarterback maybe pair with Josh Jacobs, or a team that really wants to have that dynamic offensive ability, kind of like the 49ers have had over the last few years.
Well, let's talk about Austin Eckler, number 3 on your list. Some team is going to have to roll the dice for this guy. You know, it's kind of a flashy pick, perhaps.
I am always skeptical with players, not just, you know, getting up there in age at the running back position. Seeing some of the acceleration diminished last year for Austin Eckler just gives me a little bit of pause. But if he does kind of pivot his game a little bit and really be that 3-dimensional threat, then I really like him. When he is on his game, I mean, Austin Eckler is one of the most dynamic and fun running backs.
Let's talk about Tony Pollard. We mentioned him. He is set to test the free agent market. Where do you see him ending up?
I think about a team like Minnesota, actually, when it comes to Tony Pollard, because, you know, I know that he got a lot of attention last season, but if you look at kind of the totality of the season, it was not a bad piece of work. It just looked like it was a struggle at times for Tony Pollard. You know, again, if I'm making this decision, I would look at him as a potential solution if you need a number one running back in your offense.
Derrick Henry, 30 years old. He said his goodbyes to Tennessee. Could there possibly be some whispers of him ending up in Baltimore with the Ravens? What are you hearing on that end?
Ooh, I mean, he belongs in those matchups, right? Given his play style, given just the brute force that Derrick Henry brings. And so I'm going to sound like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, but Derrick Henry doesn't concern me as much as Austin Eckler. Yes, he's going to not have as many of these breakaway touchdowns. However, if you certainly need, a kind of a short yardage, almost like Leonard Fournette was, Derrick Henry can absolutely still give you that.
Final name on your pick six list, DeAndre Swift. What do you got for me about where he could potentially end up?
In some sense, he, I think, had a better year last year than just the actual raw stats will indicate. Just the way that he plays the game, I think, contributes to winning football. DeAndre Swift is so good just coming out of the backfield as a receiver. He also is much better, I think, than people give him credit for at running between the tackles. And I wouldn't be shocked if he does have a breakout year, but I do still think there's a good chance that he ends up somewhere as kind of a high-end number 2.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to play Pick Six with us on The Game Plan.
I really appreciate it. The pleasure was all mine.
Well, that's all the time we have today on The Game Plan. Go check out the Bleav Podcast Network for more in-depth analysis on every team in the league. And we'll see you next week as we continue to prepare for the NFL Draft.